Hello. We are here at Balticon 50 in the Inner Harbor, and we're here with five-time Hugo Award winner, five-time Nebula Award winner, winner of the World Fantasy Award, Joe Haldeman. Joe, welcome back.
Glad to be back. Yeah.
You know, this is actually kind of an auspicious time. We're here in May of 2016. And this year, the World Science Fiction Convention is being held in Kansas City, Missouri, where 40 years ago, with Robert A. Heinlein as the guest of honor observing the awards ceremony, you won your first Hugo for the Forever War.
Right, yeah.
And it's been an interesting 40 years. The 10 years before that were quite interesting for you, considering Vietnam and all the other adventures you went through. If you wouldn't mind, I'd kind of like to walk past that and get kind of a perspective of what's happened with you, with your writing, but also what's happened in the genre, and if I can get some observations from you on what you see as happening now with writers and with some of your old friends. Let's start with something that you write about in your autobiography on your website, which is, and you fought and won and fought and lost a couple of times, what you called the trap in writing. When you first started out, you basically thought of an idea and then you wrote it. Mm-hmm. And then you, for the first time in your life, signed a series contract, so that rather than you waking up in the morning deciding, what do I want to write today, you woke up in the morning deciding, what do I have to write today?
Yeah.
Can you talk about this effect on the creative process for you?
Well, it's complex because I'm trying to remember how I felt back then, and the first big thing is security. You know, freelance writers don't have any real security. But here I had my income laid out for years, and all I have to do is get up in the morning and write. Unfortunately, as any fool could have predicted, it gets old. You're writing the same sort of thing every day. Sort of works against the reason you started writing in the first place. It becomes like a job, which, again, anybody who was outside the situation could have predicted. But there I was, you know, writing a series that I didn't really want to do, mm-hmm. and no real way out of it, except to write everything and then be free. But no amount of pressure from that direction is going to make you write faster, because your brain is working against the current. At least that's for me. I mean, I know people who revel in that atmosphere. I know people who freely sign a contract for 10 books, and then they write them in 2 years. You know, for me, the last 10 books I wrote, I believe, took 25 years. So, you know, I can't do that.
No. I was reading the autobiography you have posted on your website, and I do highly recommend anybody who has the time, and the way the web's being used now, everybody has the time. You should go on the website and read that. It is interesting, it is funny, it is insightful. It's just a whole lot of fun. You'll really enjoy yourselves, and you'll get to know this remarkable man a little better. The way that you developed your career was of its time. After your experiences in the war and after you came back, you were fortunate to participate in a number of writing workshops and writing programs, some of which are still extant, that helped you a great deal. Some of those programs still exist, and of course the genre is much more accepted as a viable genre for fiction now as it was then. What in that experience do you think contributed to your effectiveness as a teller of stories?
The main thing would, well, I can't say this. Now, there are two main influences. One is the Milford Writers Workshop, which is a science fiction tradition. Basically, Milford started, I don't know, in the 50s, and it started at the house of Damon Knight and Kate Wilhelm. And basically got together on the order of a dozen writers who'd do an intense writer's workshop for 2 weeks, 1 week to 2 weeks, depending. And to be invited was sort of a badge of acceptance. And so I was invited to that when I was still a kid. I felt, you know, I'd had one book out and a couple of short stories. And just to be invited, I thought, oh boy, here I am. I'm starting to arrive. And the workshop itself was tremendously intense and educational because I was surrounded by writers whom I had read all my life, and they were accepting me tentatively as an equal. And so, you know, of course, I wasn't really an equal. They were just being nice. But they were nice people, too. And so all these masters were going through my work line by line and saying, well, yeah, this is good, this is no good. And that was great. And then I got to do the same with their work, which was, in retrospect, a little comical because, yeah, I'm not a great workshopper. But, and my academic preparation was physics and astronomy. It wasn't literature or writing. And then I went off to graduate school in writing, so now I can speak the bullshit line with everybody else.
That was in Iowa, right?
Yeah, Iowa, the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is a wonderful experience on its own. And it's, you know, not so much as a place to learn how to write for a living, but it's a place to learn how to be a writer as a public person.
It's also where, quite honestly, you discovered the kind of joy of teaching receptive students that Gay has always enjoyed in her career.
Yeah, that's true.
You taught a remedial English workshop
Yeah.
for the freshmen coming in?
Yeah, I did that. I had 2 sections. We among ourselves called it Bonehead English. But it was called Rhetoric 10, and basically it was what the University of Iowa offered to people who had been accepted to a university but didn't have the English skills to pass.
We had the same thing at Kansas University, where I was living. Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was called. It was basically where the reaving began. That's where basically the people who wanted to work hard were identified and helped, and the people who just came there because it was the way to get their parents to stop yelling at them came in, went, and left.
Well, the interesting thing about that to me was I came to sympathize with these poor schlubs who would never be academic. They would never get a degree or anything like that. But Iowa, in this sort of democratic, idealistic way, said, well, at least give them a chance for a couple of years. And I saw with my own eyes the damage that this can do. There are guys I taught who should have gone straight into a shop or a garage or something.
Or an apprenticeship or a trade school or something.
They would have been happy. People who are competent but could not take education, could not take formal schooling. And I came to understand, well, I knew from the Army that there was nothing wrong with these people, that they weren't really stupid, they just weren't academic. And so I came to Iowa prepared in that way, prepared to respect them.
Right.
But man, the system just grinds them down.
It's odd because now the given is, you hear it everywhere, and quite honestly, it's promoted by every administration for the past 20 years. If you want to get ahead, you have to have a college education, which has a tendency, if you don't have that college degree, it stamps you as a failure before you even get out the gate. And that's got to be a terrible burden to take.
It's a form of self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, we're sorry that you're in a situation where you can no longer improve yourself, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
Let's get back on track.
Yeah.
Now, you've been to 2 writers' workshops, and you're writing and you're doing your work, you're freelancing and everything else like that. And then there was a time when you were living in this area.
That's right.
And your brother Jay was up in Baltimore, God bless him. And you basically created your own little mini Milford workshop called the Guilford
Workshop.
The Guilford Workshop.
Because Guilford was the Baltimore area where my brother lived.
Which was, shall we say, more of a free-form experience in terms of...
Extremely free-form. And in fact, much more enjoyable. And goofy, you know, because we didn't have to be certified. We weren't trying to impress anybody. We're just bringing out our work and reading it to each other, and we were free to bring any kind of silly stuff that we wanted.
And it was you and Ted White. Was Gardner involved in that
Gardner
too?
was there. Oh yeah, Gardner was the central force.
Oh,
Gardner
well, he was always the central force. The man sucked up all the light in the room when he came in.
That's true. And George Alec Effinger was the other permanent one. Other people came and went a little bit. Roger Zelazny dropped by for a day, and we had fun with him. Yeah. And a couple of people whose names do not cling to my poor memory, but yeah. I think the quintessential experience was the last meeting where my brother had acquired a deck of pornographic playing cards.
That's back then. Now today we just call them playing cards.
Yeah, but back then I don't know, there was a federal law against them or something, and so we would pass them out, and we had a 7-person card table,
Right.
and we had 8 people. So the person who was not playing at the time had to go sit and write. Everybody had to write a page of a story so pornographic I can't even tell you the title of it now. But so we all did our...
Actually, I believe I have the title, The Smegma.
Oh, yes.
And I won't even
Smegma
ask...
Bandit or...
something like that.
Yeah, The Trouble with Smegma. That's it. Yeah, a Sartrean epic. Yeah.
But you've done... We talked about the trap. We talked about writing for a contract. There have been a couple of times when somebody waves that much money in your face, you say, why, that actually sounds reasonable. I believe Star Trek was a notable example of that.
Yeah. And I can't complain about that because there's no way I could pretend that this was an artistic endeavor or anything like that. It was, a fairly easy job. They said, well, you can write as many of these novels as you want. These were the first novelizations of Star Trek.
Right.
And nobody had really done them. Jim Blish had done one book, but that was one book of 4 short stories.
Right, right.
And so I had to turn these teleplays into novels, and really all I did was make up a novel that had those characters in it.
Right.
And as such, that was not difficult. But I thought I was going to show them. I was going to make real novels out of these. That was my big mistake, I should have kept it low-key. But I tried to make them complex novelistic novels, and yet somehow it was peopled with characters from a television serial. So,
you talk in your biography. Has your niece ever forgiven you for making her watch all of the episodes of Star Trek before you put those novels
I think she
together?
has finally forgiven me after 40 years.
Is she a fan of science fiction, or did that basically...
Yeah,
Oh,
she's
wow.
still a fan of science fiction, and her husband goes along with it too, so
It's you've had a very long and a very successful career. You've been a prolific writer. You've always written. Do you still practice the discipline of getting up in the morning and putting words to paper?
yeah.
Well, now I noticed that we haven't seen anything new from you for a couple of years. Is there something that we could look forward to, or is this just maintaining a discipline and maintaining the flexibility and pursuing a passion?
No, I don't write much. I write every day, but I don't write as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, when I had to make money to live that way. As you probably know, if you write long enough, you can actually stop writing and keep living on your royalties and
God bless
this and that.
God bless the backlist.
Yeah. Oh man, it's not as good as it used to be because the tax system has been
Tweaked.
not helpful to us.
Yeah, yeah. And Amazon hasn't been your best friend either when it comes to the
Yeah.
pricing and the profit margins for publishers.
Oh right, it's been criminal. A couple of examples. Yeah. And then, well, the writer's life or the freelance artist's life has never been easy. It's only been easy for some people in circumstances like the Soviet Union. When we were there, we saw there was a whole class of writers who were good party members and didn't have to turn out very much good work, because they got paid for being party members and being active writers. We've never had anything quite like that, but you know, I haven't really worked the system very well. And in fact, I don't know many people who have taken advantage of it.
Do you think that's because writing, to be a good writer, you have to have a certain amount of passion for the work and what you're creating, and it's hard to do that if you're also trying to be a very balanced and very calculating business person?
It depends on what you call by good writer, or successful writer, or whatever writer. A person who sits down and writes, puts words on paper every day, is enough of a writer for my definition. But in fact, a lot of people who are very good writers don't do that. A lot of really wonderful writers go for months or even years without writing because they can't do it until they absolutely have to.
Until the tank is full and overflowing.
I guess. I don't know. I distrust metaphors because, after all, I traffic in them for a living. But
so you know how fragile and misleading they can be.
Yeah. Work is work, and I think my good fortune is that I don't have to throw away very much. But I work extremely slowly. I don't know any writers who write more slowly than I do.
Do you want to have a contest? We could find some.
Yeah, right. You'd have to dig them up. No, I'm satisfied with a few paragraphs in a day if they move the story forward. Or at least I'm dissatisfied until I've produced a few paragraphs. But I remember a time, easily remember times, when I had to write several pages, 10 pages a day, just to hit deadlines, and somehow they came out of my fingers. So yeah, it can be done easily.
Let's talk about another aspect of your life and your career as a teacher.
Yeah.
How many years at MIT?
31.
Wow.
Well, 30, I guess. Yeah.
Now, I have to guess that you would inevitably compare your experiences there with your early experiences in Iowa. And I've heard you talk about being in these classrooms with these incredibly bright and motivated people. They don't get there because somebody made them go.
No.
What is the experience like when everyone in the classroom is already an overachiever and you're trying to improve their mind or their database set? What is that like? What kind of a challenge is that for you as a teacher?
The challenge as a teacher is quite different from the challenge as a graduate student there, which is my first. As a teacher, you didn't teach the brilliant students. The gig for members of the Writers' Workshop who were teaching on a fellowship was to teach large classrooms full of people who couldn't pass the reading examination for the University of Iowa.
Right.
And so that was great fun. I guess we were talking about this earlier, but meeting people who weren't college potential or were never going to be college graduates, but had a lot of life experience and normal personalities, just regular people. There's the people you meet at the workshop. We're mostly supercharged, highly motivated, talented people. And yeah, well, I guess I've been around that kind of people all my life. That was it was like the Army experience, but put through a college filter.
But at MIT, you've had 30 years, so you've had a broad. Has there been any change that you've noticed in the makeup, in the approach, in the worldview of the people that you teach over that course of time?
It's hard to honestly see what is a change in them and a change in me, you know.
Because of the structure of the classroom?
No, I mean from my own viewpoint.
Right.
When I was a young man teaching other young people, it was rather different from being an old man teaching young people. You know.
I can see where that would be the case.
So, yeah, they were different. when I started teaching, there was still a residuum of the possibility that you could be drafted and sent off to die if you flunked out of college. So that's a lot of pressure on a teacher. Because if a young man comes to me and says, I can't flunk out because I'll die, you've got to say, well, maybe we can get you a C. You know, what kind of a monster would you be if you wouldn't say that?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah. So that was part of my early teaching experience. Later on, I get the academic version of that is, oh my God, if you give me a C, I'm going to get kicked out of graduate school. And I said, what? You'd have to get a job? Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Working on a problem set at an entirely different level.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was struck by something again that I read on your website, and that's about the sense of community. You talk about the nurturing nature of the encounters you had with writing professionals within the genre early in your career, and how there seemed to be an ethos of passing it along.
Yeah.
And then there was a moment in there where you commented about that it seems that to an extent there has been a change as the field has grown much larger, has become much more accepted, has been to an extent mainstreamed.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, that's really strong. Well, when I started writing, there were 150 members of the Science Fiction Writers of America.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there are 3,000 now. I mean, it's a totally different universe. We were the hardy band of heroes, you know. We were the people nobody understood. And we understood the universe, but they wouldn't believe us, you know. So it was a quite different mindset. I mean, now it is a profession with its professional standards. And professional standards going both ways. That is to say, you know, people join the Science Fiction Writers of America feeling like they've joined a guild which will protect them and which sets standards for this and that and the other thing. Whereas when we were first being the Science Fiction Writers of America, I don't know, the whole thing was about protection against these big publishers who wanted to take advantage of us and everything like that. And now it's more professional, I suppose, in a way, but...
Looking at it more as a career than an avocation, perhaps?
Yeah, the careerism is the part that makes me kind of uneasy. Because we wanted to make a career out of writing, but in a totally different sense. I mean, we wanted to join this panoply of great writers who changed the way people think.
Well, we're out of time, and I think my last comment is I think you did a pretty doggone good job of doing that. You are part of the panoply. You are. It has to be. I mean, Forever War will always be a marking point. It will always remind me, when I read that, of that time, and of my number in the draft queue. If I hadn't if I hadn't joined the Coast Guard, I would have been in that situation. Yeah. This is I don't want to get maudlin about this, but Joe, thank you for the last 40 years and for taking me places I never could have gone in my own imagination. I got to run along with you, tag along with you, and it was wonderful.
It's been an interesting ride.
And isn't that one of the best ways you can talk about your life, is it's been an interesting ride?
Yeah, sure.
God help us if we were bored the entire time. Well, thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
Well, that's it for this edition of Fast Forward. We hope you found something of interest, and we hope you'll come see us again. Until then, this is Tom Schad saying, take care.